So welcome to Ask the Experts about hydrangeas. Today we're going to talk about a lot of new varieties that are on the market and find out what is special about them, why they're on the market, why you might want them. We have three panelists with us and I will introduce them in just a minute. With that, what I want to do is I will briefly introduce each one of our panelists, and then I'll let them introduce themselves. So we have from Monrovia Nursery, we have Georgia, and from Bloom and Easy Van Bell Nursery, we have Devon, and last but certainly not least is we have Ryan from Bailey Nursery's Endless Summer. I'm going to launch our first poll right now, and hopefully you see it there. This is hydrangea types. So I went asking in the poll, which one do you think is the most popular in North America? And then once we close this poll, we're going to turn it back over to our panelists to kind of talk about each one of those types. But I heard you, the three of you, all talk about some trialing. Can maybe you talk a little bit about geography, where all you trial, where do you travel, where do you source, how do you get some of these new plants? Because that's kind of the focus today is new varieties. Devon, I'm going to start with you because you're at the top of my screen.
Sure. Yeah, we're looking all over the world. A lot of our genetics come out of Europe, out of Asia, out of the US and Canada actually as well. And it takes, as everyone, as my colleagues here will attest, it's a long journey for a plant to get all the way to the garden center. It takes hundreds, maybe thousands of varieties that are thrown away that aren't good enough, and just a few make that final cut. So we trial. That's one of the great things about working with a wholesale nursery. We have customers all over North America. And so once we receive them from a breeder, we then test them in the markets, in the areas where they'll be grown here, and only the best emerge.
Excellent. Okay, Georgia and Ryan, what else do you have to add to that?
Yeah, well, at Monrovia, we are really lucky that we have 4 nurseries who do extensive trials in all 4 corners of the U.S. So we have trials in Oregon, which is zone 7, 8. We have trials in Visalia, California, which is super hot, super dry. We have trials all the way down south in Cairo, Georgia. Hot, humid, the disease pressure is extreme. And then we also have trials up in Connecticut, so zone 5. So we are able to we test all of our hydrangeas for years at all 4 of our nurseries. And then luckily we also have an extensive outside sales network who are they love testing things for us in their own gardens. Surprise, surprise. So we can get some good data from our outside sales teams as well, which is really lucky.
Excellent.
Yeah, ours is not too dissimilar. We source plants from a number of different avenues. Some we work with breeding partners all around the world. Somewhat, as Devon mentioned, a little bit maybe dependent on the species and where they are native. So might find some Macrophylla, for example, from partners in Japan, Asia, but we also do a lot of breeding ourselves. We own a breeding company in Georgia where a lot of, especially the newer plants that you'll see today, came from that breeding farm in Georgia with some very intentional breeding where you might start with 100,000 seedlings and get down to 1 maybe after 8, 9, 10 years. But we also do trials at our facility here in Minnesota to test that zone 4 cold hardiness, not just to see if they survive, but if they can flower and rebloom, especially here in zone 4 Minnesota. We have farms in Illinois as well as Oregon and Washington. And then we also have a network of 90 to 100 licensees all around the world that grow our product. And we do fairly extensive and very specific trialing with a number of them in our advanced trials where they get plants a couple of years ahead of everyone else, and they fill out the same data sheet so that we get that consistent data back, testing those things like hardiness and bloom and rebloom and disease resistance, so that we get that really diverse mix of feedback before we make the decision that maybe that one is going to make it to market.
Yeah, it's a pretty selective process. I've seen that. I've seen these trials. I mean, obviously, I have the All American Selections background too. There's a lot that goes through trials, and not everything makes it. So, with our poll, it looks like we have some very good in the know people here. Which hydrangea do you think is the most popular in North America? And it is the Macrophylla is the right answer, correct? And as suggested by the poll, it looks like the Paniculata would be the second most popular. So let's talk about these. I noticed in my PowerPoint, I only put 4 of the 5 on here, not to say that Serrata is not worthy. Don't ask me why I didn't put that in here. So do you guys, let's see, do you have this in order? Maybe one of you can just take each one of the 4. Do you want to talk a little bit more about Macrophylla? And especially when you're talking about these types, which ones might be better in certain zones? I know that every time we have a webinar and we're talking about anything that's a shrub or perennial, zone hardiness is very important since we attract people from all over North America. So who wants to take the Macrophylla?
I can get us started at least. Hydrangea macrophylla, the big leaf hydrangea, as everyone has seen in the poll, that's where so much of the breeding efforts have gone, because this is what has really exploded and brought hydrangeas back to the forefront. If you look back 20, 25 years, hydrangea was not the crop that it is today. And between hydrangeas and roses are the 2 most Googled plants, at least in North America, if not the world. And part of that is due to the success of big leaf hydrangea, and especially that remontancy or that rebloom. So big leaf hydrangea, I think one of the other reasons that they are so popular is that they are adaptable across much of North America. And as you get into zone 4, really cold like we have here, some of the older varieties like Nico Blue that doesn't have that ability to rebloom are really challenging, because we have very cold winters. And if we don't have really consistent cold or snow cover, the cold temperatures and the wind can kill the flower buds, which are set last fall. The newer varieties that are out that have that rebloom potential have really made Hydrangea macrophylla possible in cold climates. So that's been really exciting. That's what's really helped bring this to the forefront. And as I mentioned, there's lots of breeding and searching for this type of plant with new color, new size, better disease resistance, better rebloom. And so this is where we're seeing a lot of work being done.
Excellent. Thank you. A lot of really stunning there. Okay, who wants to do the arborescens?
Well, I can jump in with a little information on the arborescens. This is a bit hardier. So these are hardier than the macrophylla types. These you can see from the slide at zone 3. They also are going to bloom a little later, so midsummer, and they bloom on new wood, which is really great. So even if you get that stem dieback, they don't set their flower buds in the fall. They're going to set them into the spring on their new growth, which is really nice. Arborescens are also really great for pollinators too. Pollinators seem to like the arborescens, which is another plus. And we know that gardeners really are looking for plants that are going to do more. And so this arborescens is not only beautiful, but it's going to provide some habitat and some pollen and nectar for those great insects.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, guess what, Devon, you're next, and I might have you take the last 2 since we have 2 left. So
Sure.
You want to take it away with the Paniculata?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, Paniculata or hardy hydrangeas. There's been a lot of great work done on breeding. If you've ever bought a home that was already established, had an established garden, you might have found a big, Paniculata hardy hydrangea in that garden that was 6, 8, 10 feet tall. And they're beautiful, but they're pretty big. And so a lot of the newer breeding has been about taking those great attributes, turning it into a smaller, more compact plant. And you'll see some today, I'm sure, when we talk about new varieties. And also, like the picture that we have up on the screen, we're getting a lot more breeding that allows for that late summer, early fall color, where in the past, older varieties often, when they're done blooming, they turn brown and they kind of look ugly. These Newer genetics, they can remain beautiful all the way into the fall. So really gives you a lot more to work with. And the great thing also about hardy hydrangeas, they're called hardy, but they can really flourish all over the US and Canada, all the way down from Georgia, Texas, all the way up to Winnipeg, Manitoba. Like they're so versatile. They don't have quite all the colors of the Macrophylla, but they do have a lot to offer.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, and then we'll let you take those.
Quercifolia, right? We're going to talk quercifolia. So oak leaf hydrangeas, quercifolia, they definitely would have a smaller portion of the market. But one of the really cool things about quercifolias, or I'll call them oak leaves, is it's about the foliage. So they do have a decent amount of flower power, but really it adds a different kind of texture to your garden. If you're a hydrangea lover, you can get that oak leaf serrated foliage, and the best ones, the new ones, really have beautiful summer and fall color. And again, some of the older varieties in that category really struggled with a lot of some diseases, spotting on the leaves. They wouldn't look very nice. So some of the newer ones have really tackled that. So you can have these gorgeous coppers and kind of wine colors on the foliage into the fall. So that's one of the great things about quercifolia.
Great, thank you. Okay, I am going to launch another poll here because I want to know what some of the main questions are that people might have about hydrangeas. So while people are taking that poll, we would like to go ahead and get started on our presentation of some of these new and newer varieties. And Devon, I think you're first up to share 6 of your new and newish varieties.
Sounds great. Okay, thanks, Diane. Okay, I'm going to move this poll. Okay, so first one I want to talk about is Pink Dynamo Hydrangea. It's a serrata mountain hydrangea. And I don't know if you noticed, but I'm actually wearing my Pink Dynamo shirt. And I sometimes wear this when I present on our new hydrangeas. And so if you're interested, you can maybe text me later. And we're going to drop them on our website at some point soon. But so Pink Dynamo, we saw in the poll that maybe serratas, mountain hydrangeas aren't quite as popular as Macrophyllas, but they're making a real comeback. You'll see some really cool varieties here with all of our presentations, I think. So with Pink Dynamo specifically, what we think is really special about it is that contrast. It has those bright hot pink flowers. They're quite large florets for this type of hydrangea, and they contrast so beautifully with this dark foliage. A very healthy, compact, reblooming hydrangea. So really quite easy to see success with it. You can see it in the garden there on that bottom right picture. It just flowers and flowers and stays in that nice compact form.
And Pink Dynamo, quick question, full sun in afternoon or morning? And of course that might be, well, it depends on where you're located in North America.
Yeah, and I think typically Pink Dynamo and other hydrangeas, they love that morning sun. And 4 to 6 hours is probably ideal for it, but this can handle more sun than some Macrophyllas. So it's not super sensitive, but it will flourish with probably that 4 to 6 hours and more toward the morning.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, kimono. So we love, and probably all my co-presenters here feel the same way about all their hydrangeas. We love them all, right? And then there's still a few favorites in amongst, just like our kids, right? This one, whenever we show kimono anywhere, people they go right toward it. It is a real showstopper. You can just tell by those two-tone blooms. They kind of shine, they kind of glow. And we've seen some of these type of colors in the market before, but we think this one is a real special one, a really great garden performer. And you may have seen some of these kind of colors in more floral greenhouse type hydrangeas, but these ones, This one really performs well in the garden. The foliage comes out that rich dark green, will almost go toward black depending on how much sun it's getting, depending on your region, and it has that nice bit of glossiness to it, gives that extra level of interest, stays compact, and also is a rebloomer. And I think you'll hear reblooming, remontancy as a real theme with all new hydrangea breeding. It's one of the great things. Probably most people have had some kind of bad experience with pruning their hydrangeas, their macrophyllas incorrectly. I know I did about 20 years ago, and I had a real sad spring one time. But the new hydrangeas really help people have a way higher chance of success. Still a few rules to follow, but the breeding is so much better. So this one's it's a beauty. Starfield. Okay, so this one is a double floret style bloom. So it gives you a different kind of texture in your garden. And this one is a heavy bloomer. So the breeder that this comes from, which is from the Netherlands, he's been breeding for probably 30 years in the hydrangea area. And he claims this one is the heaviest flowering hydrangea he's ever released. So this one just wants to flower. You can see it in, even when it's in the pot, it is just loaded and stays nice and compact. It does get a nice purple. It doesn't go all the way to the blue if you have a lower pH soil, or if you add aluminum sulfate, which we'll probably talk about a bit more later. So a different texture, heavy flowering. Okay, cherry go round. I think you might have seen this in some of the ads for this webinar. And what gets us really excited about this one, a couple things. Number one, the color. So that is the real color. It is cherry red. And it's not that easy of a color to get in when it comes to hydrangeas. Often you'll get sort of a pinky red, but this one is a true cherry red. And it will age to a really dark red, and the flowers will actually still look whole and complete at the end of their cycle, and but they will look really quite dark. Another thing that we love about this one is, I'm not sure if you can tell on your screen, but I picked a picture here that showed some foliage, and you'll see again a little bit of a shine on the foliage. It has a bit more waxiness, and what that does, it gives it the ability to handle sun a little bit better, because macrophyllas are a little bit sensitive to too much sun. But when you see one that has that gloss on it, that's probably an indicator it can handle it a little bit better than others. So that, and then also, hopefully someday someday soon, you'll have one of these in your own garden, and then you'll be able to touch that bloom, and the bloom almost feels fake. It is so hard. You can bat it around, pets can run right over it, kids can fall on top of it, and it'll still be pretty, it'll still look beautiful. So we love it for that aspect as well. Okay, this one is a hardy hydrangea, Paniculata, and we call it Dragon Baby. The top picture is from our Bloom and Easy show garden out near Vancouver in British Columbia. So if you're ever in that area, we'd love to see you. And you can see the flower power is really impressive. And again, we talked about this earlier. You'll see other great ones here in the next hour, but a compact form and still with enough strength to hold up those blooms. So there's been a lot of great breeding, and you're going to benefit from that when you start buying some of these new genetics, like Dragon Baby as one example. You'll also see in that bottom right picture that fall color, kind of late summer, August, early September. Again, a beautiful pink, and that'll depend on what region you're in. It's a bit tougher in the south because you won't get the same chilling hours, but anywhere sort of mid to more northern areas, you'll see that beautiful color emerge. And so, and again, that's one of the things that I think we're all trying to bring to you, the gardeners that we appreciate so much. We want to give you plants that have that interest for a longer period of time in your garden. Older genetics, if you have any in your garden, you might want to just consider getting rid of them and bringing some of what you're going to see today, because you can have 3, 4, 5 months of real beauty, where some of the older genetics, they might be beautiful, but maybe only for 4, 6, 8 weeks. So that's one of the other benefits to think about. Okay, last one on my list, green and tonic. So we've been searching for a great garden performing white blooming hydrangea, and we think green and tonic is it. You will see. I mean, one of the challenges with any kind of a white flowering hydrangea in the garden will be some sun scorch. And this one, green and tonic, as you can see on the bottom pictures especially, it will emerge with these kind of lime and white blooms, and that's why we call it green and tonic. Kind of sounds refreshing and fun. And but the top picture, I took that in my own yard a few years ago, and I'm not sure if anybody remembers, but we up in our area we had what they called the heat dome, and it was scary. It was crazy, but it was very hot. Normally we're really moderate. We have the coastal effect on the West Coast, and we don't get very hot temperatures. But a couple of years ago, we were hitting well above 100 Fahrenheit. We actually cracked into about 110, 112 Fahrenheit, and it lasted for a few weeks. This plant had about 6 hours of sun, direct sun a day, and it did incredibly well. We did see a tiny little bit on some of the edges of the leaves, but boy, we were really impressed. So I think it's a great one that you can enjoy another good contrasting color in the Macrophylla range, in the big leaf range.
And I love the name. I want the job for any of you guys of naming these plants. I love the grin and tonic. I love the dragon baby. I mean, if you want to get kids into gardening, that'd be a perfect way to do it, is to pull those names in. And Devon, you had mentioned a lot of the breeding trends that I'm sure we're going to hear. And it's fascinating to see what the breeders are working on. And I think, Georgia, a lot of yours now are going to say strong stems, and especially good for cut flowers, which is another great usage in the garden, inside the home. So it's wonderful that we have breeding companies such as the three of yours and others that are doing so much work and getting these new products that just perform better for us in the garden. So, okay, Georgia, let's turn it over to you now.
Okay, so I'm really excited to share most of what I'm going to share today is in our Seaside Serenade collection. So this first one that we're seeing is Seaside Serenade Newport. It's that gorgeous Macrophylla, deep plum colored flower. I think that's a really unique color. And if you look closely at the photo, you can see that the bract is that deep plum, and then inside that fertile flower is this bright blue. It's just a little tiny detail that I just love about this plant. Super, super floriferous, as Devon and Ryan both mentioned, that remontancy, the ability to bloom on both old and new wood, is really critical in new varieties. And all of ours, including Newport, are going to do that. This is zones 4 through 9, because I know that's always a question. 3 to 4 feet tall by 3 to 4 feet wide. One of the main reasons why this plant is so exceptional is the breeding that's gone behind it. So this is actually a tetraploid, which maybe sounds scary, but I assure you it's not scary. It's just natural breeding. But what that does is it thickens the cuticle of the leaf and the flower, which creates this really tough, leathery plant. So because the leaf is super tough and leathery, it's going to hold up to wind events. So it's not going to tatter in the winds like you can so often get. It also is going to hold up to that heat again. So as Devon mentioned, those freak heat events, or if you live in a place that's just pretty hot during the summer, you'll notice that a lot of your macrophyllas are going to sort of shrivel and look a little sad during the heat of the day. It's fine. They're going to be okay. But something like this Newport is not going to look like that. able to hold its water in. And I notice that in my garden, it really looks nice when a lot of the other plants are sort of wilty. And then they also, this Martha's Vineyard is another one that's going to have those same tough, leathery leaves and flowers. So because the flower is also really thick and sturdy, they're going to last up to 3 to 4 months on the plant. So they just have this really strong ability to look beautiful throughout a lot of the growing season. They also have the ability to stand up to midday watering. So I know I'm guilty of it. You're forgetting to water and you go out with the hose in the midday. Usually that'll scorch the Macrophylla flowers, just these little brown circles on the blooms. But because these flowers are so tough, they really hold up well to that. So it's a little more carefree, which is what we're always looking for. And it's that beautiful flower color also.
I'm going to interject one question here. And it's 2 questions. I love the name Seaside Serenade. So I think you need to explain how you got that series name. And then somebody is asking about any of them being salt tolerant, seaside, so that's why I'm combining those questions 2 in 1. All 3 of you can answer the question about salt tolerance, but Georgia, I want to know about the Seaside Serenade series name.
Yeah, well, we were really inspired by Cape Cod and all the beautiful hydrangeas on the East Coast. So that's where that came from. We were sort of an ode to the, there's that big hydrangea festival out there. Just those beautiful, big, giant hydrangeas is what we were inspired by when we were naming the collection. And great coastal plants. So yeah, wonderful, wonderful for the coast. And then another Seaside Serenade newer one is Cape Lookout. So we had the purple, the bright pink, and then this one is our white. This is one of my absolute favorites. It's behind me in my background. It starts off pale green, and then it turns to white. And then as it ages, it's going to develop this lovely light pink color. So you get this really beautiful antiqued look. And again, those same characteristics, the blooms are going to last for 3 to 4 months and continually bloom. So you're going to have this really long bloom cycle. Another, all the Seaside Serenades were actually cut flower rejects. And so for the florists, they want long, long stems. And for gardeners, we want shorter stems, more compact plants. And these stems were too short for the cut flower industry. And so we get the perk of that is that we get a really beautiful cut flower as well, something that's going to last for a really long time in your vases at home.
I love those stories. Breeding for one thing, found something perfect for another. So no waste, right?
Mm-hmm. And then next is another one of our brand new ones called Glacier Bay. I love this plant. I think it's super modern. Hydrangeas are sort of that classic, I think, of cottage style gardens, but this really brings it into a super modern layout. So you could have a really cool modern home and put something in like Glacier Bay and it would look right at home. Jet black stems with that pure white lace cap flower. That flower is also almost star shaped and cupped. And so it's a really unique plant all around from stem to flower. And then Crystal Cove is also another new one, really super frilly lace cap blooms. You get that strong undulated edge with that bright purple plum color. As it starts, it has more white. And then as it ages, it sort of deepens into its plum color. I also love the foliage has a slight hint of that plum also. So it kind of picks up those colors. Crystal Cove and Glacier Bay are our newest, but they both are going to be that 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, just like the others. Wonderful disease resistance and also reblooming. So we're really happy to have these as part of our Seaside Serenade collection. And then lastly is a Paniculata variety. So this is called Strawberry Shake. Paniculatas can sometimes, the blooms can be so big and the stems can have a hard time standing upright, but we really like strawberry shake because you can enjoy the blooms. The stems are going to hold them up. This is a nice size, 4 to 5 feet tall, so more compact than some of the older varieties, but still big enough to have that show. Really nice full flowers. Also, they start off lime green and white, and then as they age, they turn to that beautiful pink color, hence the strawberry shake name.
Love the name. That's great. And Ryan, you're next up, but I just, somebody has asked a question. Do you have any experience with the hydrangea cross of Serrato and Macrophylla?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm gonna the Serrata in my Devon and Ryan may know different, but it's a subspecies of Macrophylla. They're a little more stem hardy than Macrophylla, but I believe it's a subspecies, but Devon or Ryan may tell me I'm wrong.
Oh, Devon, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, Georgia, at all. But I might still defer to Ryan on that one. But what a lot of the breeding, what happens is the breeders will come out and they'll just call them hybrid, because there is a certain point where there's so many different elements happening with these plants that they might have a little bit of Macrophylla, a little bit of Serrata, a little bit of this and that. And so it goes back as well to the discussion about trialing, because we end up with these beautiful plants that are really cool, have all these great aspects to them. But that's where it's our job as companies bringing these plants to make sure they are performing and to find out, like, how are they acting more like a Serrata or more like a Macrophylla. So that's another reason, I think, where, you know, for you as gardeners out there, when you go into a garden center, this is one thing that's great about when you see a Monrovia pot, an endless summer pot, a Bluminese pot. You can trust them. Every plant will still need some love, but these plants have so much work behind them and years of testing and research. So it's one thing that's really cool, I think, about this time for gardeners. And so just an encouragement to think about that when you're going to find that next beauty for your garden.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into talking about Popstar. So I can weave that into my conversation around this, if that works, Diane.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Popstar is our newest introduction. It is just hitting garden centers now in the Endless Summer collection. This is a lace cap variety, as you can see. And to touch on the Serrata piece, probably somewhere in like the great grandparentage of this plant is some Hydrangea serrata that was used in the breeding. It is a Hydrangea Macrophylla. That is primarily what is in this plant, but somewhere in a parentage there might be some Hydrangea serrata, which, as Devon mentioned, you're going to get some stronger stems, some greater bud hardiness. Sometimes from that mountain hydrangea, they can tolerate a little bit more of the extreme, especially on the cold side of it. And so for us, when we look to introduce something into Endless Summer, we only have 6 plants in the entire collection with Popstar now this year. So we're really, really particular and very slow and methodical in how we go through introducing these plants. The initial seedling of this was discovered in 2014 in our breeding work down in Georgia. And as I mentioned, we can go from 100,000 Hydrangea Macrophylla seedlings at the beginning of a year down to 10,000, down to maybe 500, down to maybe 30 that make it into the container trials. And so we've spent the last 9 years testing what is now called Popstar. And it goes through a lot of things: cold hardiness here in Minnesota, heat and humidity down in Georgia, and then everything in between across all of our sites. But one of the really big things, as Bob asked about, and a few others have asked about, bud hardiness. And not just having a plant that can survive, and we call it zone 4, but really thrive and be a successful blooming plant. Because if you want a green shrub, you buy a green shrub, right? If you want a hydrangea, you want something that's going to give you flower power. And so that's part of why it takes us so long, especially if we're going to label something zone 4, is that it really can happen here and put out those flower buds. And that is something that we saw consistently with Popstar. Not only is it retaining those old wood flower buds, and one of our trial sites not too far from where we are here in St. Paul, these plants are in the middle of a field in zone 4. We don't do any crazy winter protection. The wind, the elements just sort of take them. And if those flower buds survive, that's when we know we've got a really strong zone 4 plant. And we have temperatures 30 below zero. In one of the trial years, I think it was 2018, we had negative 35 degrees. So we really put these through the ringer. So that's old wood flower buds. We also do new wood, that ability to rebloom. And so with Popstar as an example, one of the things that we do is it does the full set of old wood flower buds in the pot. We cut it back to 3-4 inches, and then we watch to see how fast and how many flowers reappear, so we can test genetically what that horsepower is to produce that rebloom. And with Popstar, it was producing new flower buds in 4 weeks, which is more than twice as fast as any other Hydrangea Macrophylla that we had in trial. So not only is it able to keep those old wood flower buds and give those of us in zone 4 and 5 the ability to have some early season hydrangea flowers, but that rebloom potential is really, really significant. So this one is absolutely covered in flowers. You can see here, it's almost like an electric blue in acidic soil with that lower pH and presence of aluminum. In the higher pH alkaline soils like we have in Minnesota naturally, you'll see a darker pink. So compact, great in the landscape, great in deco pots, great as a cut flower, but really, really just a powerhouse when it comes to blooms. The next one is Summer Crush, which is sort of similar in that it is a compact plant. It's similar in that it retains those old wood flower buds. Again, this is something that we test really, really heavily, especially since we were the first to put this reblooming hydrangea, zone 4 Hydrangea Macrophylla onto the market. We spent the last 19, we're celebrating 20 years of Endless Summer next year, spent all that time working on continuing to tweak that. So those of us in zone 4, 5, 6 don't have old wood flower buds that might die and then not have that potency of rebloom. So Summer Crush, when we introduced this a couple of years ago, was really that first really big push of that compact, absolutely covered in flower plants. And this is one where that first set of flowers, you can see that really, we call it rich raspberry red, that deep pink color. Those blooms on an 18 to 36 inch tall plant can get up to 10, sometimes 12 inches. So massive, massive flowers, and then incredible rebloom. So you get that multiple stage of flower on them. So great small plant, great in containers. You can see the glossy foliage on there, similar to what Georgia was talking about. When you can see that really deep, rich color of the leaf and that glossiness, that helps it stand up to some of that heat. So when it stays that nice and compact, you don't want it sort of flopping over in the afternoon heat. This is one that will continue to stand up, similar to Popstar as well. Next, we're switching to Hydrangea Paniculata. This is one called Little Hottie Hydrangea. This picture right here is at our farm in Georgia and has been in the ground for a number of years. This is just, again, it's our breeding farm where we do a lot of our trials. So other than drip irrigation, we do nothing to these. This is about 4 feet tall, and this had been in the ground for about 5 years. So pretty well established and has not gotten big. It stays that relatively mid-sized, smaller landscape plant. But one of the things that we love about Little Hottie is, one, you can see how many blooms are on there. You almost can't see the green leaves. But Hydrangea Paniculata, we talk a lot about for those of us in cool climates and doing really, really well and being great plants for us in the north. But in warm climates, Hydrangea Paniculata can tend to brown out, especially as you get a little bit later into the summer. And this plant, having been bred in Georgia, we're in Athens, Georgia, it stays this really crystal clear white flower. This is planted in basically full sun at our farm there. Stays like this all season long. In Minnesota, it will get, or for those of us in cool climates, it will get that pink as the nighttime temperatures cool down. In warmer climates, it's not going to burn, so it's not going to turn brown, but it's not going to get as rich. It turns almost more of a parchment. So looking for something like under your windowsill, nice full sun, lots of really brilliant white color all summer long into fall, and then some nice fall color in cool climates. Little Hottie's a great option for you. This is one that I really love. I mean, I love them all, but as Devon was saying, sometimes we have our favorite children. This is one that is just really spectacular. Similar to the other paniculatas, is going to bloom white at first in sort of that midsummer, early midsummer. And then as the nighttime temperatures cool down, it almost gets like a Merlot color. It's so fabulous. We have a really good friend, Kelly Norris, who's a really fabulous garden designer, author, speaker. His book is called New Naturalism, and which is all about, you know, native and more natural planting style. So hydrangeas are not his favorite thing. But I was driving around the farm with him a couple of years ago, and he saw berry white planted way back in our trial block that was like a half a mile away. And he was like, "What is that? I love that." So I always say, if I can get Kelly Norris to like a hydrangea, it is a great plant. This one's going to get bigger. So if you're looking for something like, if you know vanilla strawberry, about that size. So, you know, we talk a lot about compact plants, but we also over the last few years have experienced that sometimes we need a nice hedge too to block out our neighbors. So if you're looking for a hedge that is more than green and will give you some multi-season interest, berry white is a great option. Big flower heads, but really, really strong stems as well. They get big, you know, 10, 12-inch blooms on them, and they stand perfectly upright. Plus that really great fall color. The fall color will appear in some warmer climates. When you get all the way down to zone 8, not quite as intense as this, unless you have some cool fall nights, but still really nice and really, really spectacular in cool climates. Switching it up a little bit, talking about an oak leaf hydrangea. As was mentioned at the beginning, oak leaf is a really fun, the species is native to North America, so that's a nice little added benefit that we have, but just a different texture and shape and bloom time from a lot of other hydrangeas to bring to the garden. It's native to like woodland settings along streams, so great in that type of planting. But as you can see, those lobed leaves are really thick and lush in the early in the season. The blooms are going to come in about June, and almost kind of looks like panicle hydrangea, where it is that cone-shaped flower. This one we call jet stream because it looks like right as the plane's taken off. That beautiful white flower early in the season. Leave that bloom on if you'd like to get some of that late season as it turns that parchment color. Again, contributes to that really beautiful woodland type look. But the fall color on it is absolutely spectacular. This one was selected because the fall color is so rich. Again, that sort of Merlot, like I was talking about with berry white flowers. It's really deep red leaves on this, which makes it just so beautiful. We even have it planted in zone 4. We don't list it as zone 4 because it blooms on old wood and those flowers typically get zapped in our winter, but we don't care. We have it planted in our garden here because that fall color is just so amazing. And to have that added texture to the landscape is really beautiful. A little more compact than the species, or if you know some of the bigger, older varieties like Alice, this is going to be a little bit more compact, really sturdy stems. So it's a really dense plant as well. Great way to fill some space and add a little extra interest to the landscape. And I think this might be my last one. Another one of those sort of like hidden gem plants. This one's called white diamonds, and it is a panicle hydrangea. So similar to what we think about with the little hottie and the berry white, but this is a little bit looser of a bloom. You can see that it's almost like they took that cone and pulled it apart a little bit. So if your design style is a little bit more natural, if you want to add a little bit of a different texture, this is a great one to use. It is similar to the other panicles, super easy to maintain, blooms on new wood. really cold hardy to zone 3. But this is really has that gorgeous green leaf, white flower, and then turns parchment pink in fall, but sort of mid-size. So again, if you're looking for sort of that mid-size hedge look, we've got a big row of them planted along a fence line that's just spectacular. So again, it's one of those that's maybe a little more underutilized. Doesn't have that perfect cone shape, but again, with that looser planting style, that looser bloom fits really, really well. So one of my favorite underutilized panicle hydrangeas.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. With our poll, as suspected, the main question that everyone has is about pruning. So, Ryan, there's a couple specific endless summer questions. So I'm thinking maybe you can type some responses to those. And Devon and Georgia, maybe you guys can give us a good overview and some specifics on pruning. I know, first thing is you have to know which variety and which type of hydrangea you have. So you need to know that before you can know when to prune. But would you guys want to give some good overviews about this pruning question we get all the time?
Sure. I'll start it off, and we can kind of go back and forth. Ryan was just talking about Paniculata hydrangeas, and that is one of the great things about paniculatas is that they know that the pruning isn't too sensitive. So I think a great time to prune a paniculata would be early spring, and they can handle taking them down at least a third of that woody structure, sometimes even more. I've tried all kinds, and you want to be able to keep enough structure so they can hold up those blooms and keep that shape that you're looking for. And one other thing I was going to actually I was thinking about this as Ryan was talking about the white diamonds. If you come across a looser, kind of more open paniculata type, like PW has Quickfire, Bloom & Easy has Flare and Torch. There are others. They like Ryan said, a nice different texture, but they also are a little bit more attractive to pollinators, to bees and butterflies, because they can access the fertile flowers a little bit more than on, let's say, a Macrophylla or a really full panicle plant. So a couple other bonuses there you get. But back to pruning. Again, paniculatas, take them down to that kind of third off that structure. And then the other thing that is one more kind of layer is over the years, if you have a hardy hydrangea in your garden for a lot of years, you might get some real, thick woody branches. And what you can do each year, you can kind of take out a few while still keeping that full structure. If you kind of go to the base of the plant with a nice sharp lopper and just kind of thin it out a little bit, you'll see other kind of fresh branches emerge and fill it back out, and that'll keep it fresher.
And it can also improve airflow. I think pruning is really important for improving your airflow and keeping diseases at bay. So things like mildew and fungal diseases, things like that, pruning can be really helpful. I would note, as you're going through with these and you're pruning, look for the dead, damaged, diseased wood. You always want to remove those, of course, ideally at ground level. And then the pencil thin stems, so those really small stems you want to get rid of, and then any stems that are rubbing. So I always like to think of when I look at the plant, if you have multiple options, think about where that plant is heading, where that branch is heading. So if it's heading inward, or if it's going to rub up with another, you want to get rid of those, because you want to make sure that the plant is nice and open to prevent those diseases from happening.
Excellent.
And then for ones that bloom on old wood, that's, I think, where we get a lot of the questions. And you can hear that pruning them right after they bloom is ideal. Sometimes it's hard for those plants to have time to regrow and form the flower buds. So really, actually, macrophyllas, sometimes they don't really need to be pruned. You can get rid of those dead, damaged, and diseased wood like we talked about, but a lot of the macrophyllas really don't need it, especially when we're talking about all these new plants that you just heard about that are going to naturally stay quite compact. So if you have one that gets sort of unwielding and you're not sure, I would recommend, like Devon mentioned, maybe it's time for an upgrade onto some of these newer varieties that are easier.
Yeah, I think pruning, as you all have asked for, is really our biggest question we get, especially with Macrophylla. And similar to what Georgia said, we usually say less is more, less hands-on work, whether it means pruning, watering, fertilizing, more blooms you'll get. If you cut it back in the fall accidentally, even if it's a great rebloomer, it's still going to spend that energy next season trying to push up new stems and then flowers. So we just say maybe give it a deadhead after that first set of blooms, leave it alone in fall, and then in spring, just give it a haircut. Wait until, depending on where you are, Mother's Day, sometimes for us in zone 4 who just started getting into the 60s like last week, maybe a little bit longer this year, let that plant start to wake up, because you'll see the green start at the base, and then those stems sometimes are just a little slower to wake up than some of our other plants. So you got to give it a little time. You'll see the green come up, and then just cut back to right above that green, anything that didn't survive or any of those old blooms from last year. Because when we do give it a hard prune, it is tough, even for the plants that have really great horsepower, as I was talking about, to push out new blooms. If you're making it also grow stems, it's just using that energy for other things as well. So put down the
one thing I would
pruners.
add to what Ryan is saying too on the timing is we probably all experienced this as well. We have a bit of nice weather, maybe in March or early April. The plants start to wake up and we think it's time, it's gardening time. So get in there, do some work. And then all of a sudden, here comes another hard frost. And then the plants get really knocked down. So I think just a basic rule of thumb for wherever you are, just keep looking. There's so much good information about when your frost-free date is going to be. And then after that, you'll be safe to start following up on that light pruning. I think that's great advice.
What about pruning into the tree form? Like on a standard, is there one hydrangea that you would say is better for that kind of severe pruning, I guess, or training? What do you call it?
Yeah, I think typically hardy hydrangeas are the most likely candidates for that kind of a project. And you can probably in a really good independent garden center, wherever you are, or at any garden center, you might be able to find a tree form Hydrangea paniculata. They can be really beautiful. And if you want to tackle the project yourself, they're the one type I think that really have that the strength, the potential strength in a stem to hold up and kind of grow into that tree form. I have seen it on macrophyllas, but it's more rare.
And for pruning, I've noticed that some of the tree form paniculatas can take a little bit harsher of a prune, especially in a lot of those tree forms you're trying to keep, depending on, of course, where you've planted it, you're trying to keep it more compact. You see a lot of them by your front entryway. And so just being mindful to keep it to, they can handle quite a bit of pruning. So, just every spring going through and pruning and taking out those small stems, the stems that are rubbing the dead, the disease, and making it nice and tight, even with the prune, then they'll flush out really nice and continue to be beautiful.
Good information. So because of the fact that we only have like 2 minutes left, but we can go over a little bit. The second question that everyone had was about fertilization. And I know last year or 2 years ago when we did a webinar, I was really surprised at when you need to cut off fertilization. So can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think in general, and if you have other suggestions too, please jump in. But in general, if you don't know what type of hydrangea you have, or you've got multiple, just a basic 10-10-10 is okay. When you're talking about Hydrangea macrophylla, especially, we recommend a bloom boosting fertilizer. But be careful, because some of the packaging that will either say bloom booster or will show a hydrangea on there with a brand that shall not be named, is all nitrogen. And nitrogen produces a lovely green shrub, but is not great for producing blooms. You want more phosphorus. So if you can find one that is a bloom booster, that middle number of that NPK is a little bit higher, that's great. That can help. We say, when you start to see that green leafy growth, apply fertilizer in spring. I think about it like a cup of coffee in the morning. It's like that jump start to help wake you up and get you going. And then especially if you've got a rebloomer and you're starting to, the plant is starting to produce that second set of flowers, midsummer, early summer, depending on where you are. Follow package instructions for how much, but apply another set. Then it's like the Red Bull to get you through the afternoon and into the evening, right? So those two little things, you don't want to over fertilize, especially if you've got a lot of nitrogen. We do get a lot of questions with fertilizer, why they're not getting blooms, and their plant is right next to their lawn that is very heavily fertilized. That's all nitrogen that can help that can inhibit your bloom production. So a couple of little tweaks, especially with macrophylla, which is where we see most questions with fertilizer. So try and follow that. Again, follow package instructions. They're all a little bit different for how much and how often, but similar to the pruning, don't overdo it, because that can also burn the root system, can inhibit some bloom production.
And
Yeah,
Ryan, I really like your analogy to coffee and Red Bull, because then when you think about stopping your fertilizing, it gets really easy to think about like, okay, late like August, the
Yep.
plants are, depending on where you live, of course, right? But when you're starting to think about bedtime, starting to think about the things are sort of getting ready for winter, you wouldn't drink coffee before bed. So, if you're like me, it's like after 1 p.m., I'm not going to be consuming caffeine because that'll ruin my bedtime. So you think about, it's the same analogy for plants and fertilizing also.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think you're bang on, both of you, on it. With fertilizing too late in the season, it's going to confuse the plants, and it'll keep on growing. And then all of a sudden, the cold will hit, especially in places like Minnesota, but in all areas, and that can really shock a plant, and we'll give it a really tough time actually the following spring to come out and be that beautiful hydrangea you're hoping for. So we also like working with organic fertilizers, because that can also just sort of reduce the risk. It's again in that same theme that Georgia and Ryan have been talking about. Like, just don't go crazy. Just do, give it a little bit of help, but don't try to give it too much help. And so that's where the organic, you can't really over fertilize when you're using something like, we like Nature Source. And we get nothing for that, but we use it and we love it, and it's a nice, safe one.
So I'm kind of thinking of that as, don't be a helicopter gardener, back off a little bit. You don't have to over fertilize or over anything, is probably one of the best pieces of advice, and wonderful for all the new gardeners. You can really have beautiful hydrangeas even if you're not caring for them every day. So that's good.
And Diane, at the risk of doing the last word thing, it's one more reminder of, you saw a lot of great plants here today, and this works really well with the newer, better genetics, because they are bred to be more disease resistant, to be more compact naturally, to flower more heavily on old and new wood. You can do less and just experience a beautiful garden, and in ways that we just weren't available to any of us, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So it's really a cool time to be into gardening.
I
live in like lots of analogy, and when we talk about some of the older varieties versus what we have now, I think about a car, and you might drive the same kind of car you did 20 years ago, but you probably have a newer version that has better safety features and a better engine. It's the same with our plants. And not to say that the older varieties aren't good plants, but the newer genetics are just better. And that bud hardiness and ability to rebloom and disease resistance and size, all of those things get better and better because companies like all three of ours are spending a lot of time and resources to make these plants be more successful for you without the inputs of time and work and fertilizer and other resources. So they do just get better. And so if you've struggled with some in the past and you watch some of these videos that we've all shared on how to be successful and you're still struggling, it might be time to try something that has some of that better genetic in it.
Right. It's not you. It's not the gardener. It's the old genetics. And well, in fact, I'm just thinking about my own property. When I moved in 30 years ago, there were lilacs that were somewhat mature at the time. It's embarrassing to say, but I have not replaced those. Well, oh my gosh, there's so many things out there that are much better because I'm struggling with them. So it's not me. It's that they're old. The other trees have grown over them. So it's time to, throw that baby out with the bathwater and try something new.
Refresh.
Yes, I'll do a refresh. I'll buy a newer model of car. Okay, this was wonderful information. It's so exciting to see the beautiful new varieties. Please keep it up. It's exciting to see and talk about and share. So we thank all of you for the wonderful work, the wonderful tips. We will follow up with an email to everybody who registered with additional links and tips from all of our websites. So with that, happy gardening. Go get some new hydrangeas and make it easier on yourself.